Hello.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Grimshaw of House of Secrets Comics in Burbank.
My name's Eric Warfield. I work here at House of Secrets also.
For many, many years.
Many years. 25 years in the business, so.
Perfect.
We sell comics.
Yeah,
What we do.
we've been doing that a long time.
I think we just mentioned already. Ideas or images.
Yeah, anything like that like when you use media to promote some kind of political agenda.
Or a singular idea.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Whether that's, I don't know, feed the hungry or
Absolutely.
bomb Latveria, right? You can, whatever that is, you use media in order to convince somebody of something, right?
Perfect,
usually
yeah.
partially. It's usually
I agree.
not stereotypical. It's usually an exaggeration, right? There's a little bit of that behind
Okay,
it.
I mean, you want to extrapolate on it, you could say advertising.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, right?
It's the coldest tasting beer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Alright, so
We talked about that a little bit. I think a little from column A and a little from column B. I mean, Wonder Woman was created. The gentleman, is it? I was
Peters. H.G. Peters?
No, it's the Wonder Woman creator. It's Morrison, William H. Morrison, whatever.
Oh.
But he was actually taken. He was asked to create a new superhero because of the popularity of Superman. So, and they wanted a superhero that was different. So I think in a weird way, not in a weird way. I think yes, I think Wonder Woman was created to be an example of feminism. I think a lot of people think of feminism as a negative term. It's empowerment of women. If you look at the character, she's very, very strong. I agree on that part. The sexism part, I don't know if it was anti-sexism. I think that came later on when they used Wonder Woman in examples, the Linda Carters and the busty kind of Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
I think she was definitely created for an example of feminism. But
Sure.
sexism, I'm not 100% on board on.
Not at first.
Anti-sexism, I'm not 100% on board on.
Yeah. Not in bicycle shorts. There's no way they can pull that off.
Yeah.
The little skirt, though.
Well, especially with
they still do with the little
I mean,
skirt.
but
Well, you also said in the JSA, she started out. She was the secretary of the JSA. She didn't go out and fight. They didn't let her punch people. Right.
No,
At
she
first, they
was
were
a-
like,
yeah.
take notes of our meeting.
Yeah, the Justice
While the
Society
boys
of
are
America
all-
was the first team that she was a member of, right?
Yeah.
But they called her an honorary member. You got to understand, this is back in the 40s. I'm sure you guys know
Yeah.
this. But she was also like, it was kind of like, hey, welcome to the team. But while you're here, would you mind being the secretary?
Take some
So
coffee and take some
yeah,
vacation.
in one hand, you're saying we're empowering this character.
Yeah.
And I actually did a little bit of research on this, and I discovered that from some of the articles I read, that Wonder Woman was actually going to be a male character. That was a very sensitive character that wasn't the rough and tumble, like punch in the face, the characters like you see, like the Captain Americas with Shield and the fight and that kind of stuff. They were going to make a sensitive male character, and it was one of his college friends that said, you know what, you should make that character female.
okay.
So I don't know. I mean, coming from a female's perspective, so yeah, I'm kind of I'm kind of torn.
I think you get a couple things with the Wonder Woman. You get some propaganda purely by her outfit, because there's other girls that were
Well, the imagery,
like
exactly,
Buckskin, like our Buckskin Belle, right, in Lone Ranger, girl. That's an empowerment. It's a girl cowboy who goes out and shoots guys and doesn't take any guff, right? You've got Lady Luck, right? Another one of my favorite characters.
Right.
It's like she's kind of a socialite like Bruce Wayne. So it's like she just wears a green hat, green dress, a veil over her face, and she goes out and she beats up criminals and stops people with guns. So it's like they had characters at that time from the 30s and the 40s that did the same thing, but yeah, she's more at the forefront of what's going on. And I think by making her costume red, white, and blue with
red, white, and
stars
blue.
and stuff,
Exactly.
now you're changing you're changing what's behind her. Not necessarily making it feminism, or empowering women, but you're at a symbol of America, just like Superman's a symbol of America. So that kind of crosses over a little bit.
Thank you.
Now it is, but that's a recent thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I gotta go with no. I just think it's a really good plot device. Or like a good James Bond movie.
Yeah, it's a way to make it serious. Her first appearance, she's like James Bond. She's dressed up in a mink. She's got like a mink stole and a dress on and a pearl necklace, and she's like this,
I mean, there's elements of it
Right.
definitely
They don't get into any of
Cold
her,
War kind of stuff.
They
you know?
never, ever allude to her being indoctrinated since she was a little kid. They didn't get into that until more recently.
Well, exactly. The last
Yeah, that's a new thing. But not to say that they wouldn't have done that at the time when they created her, had they known that, right? I'm sure the creators who came up with her, if they were reading stuff about common indoctrination of children, which now we know was true, right? They didn't really know that at the time. They could guess. They could guess and make it propaganda. This is what they do to their kids, horrible things. But they don't know that for a fact. Now we know it for a fact, and now guys try to write that in there. I think that's more of a modern. I think that's a modern interpretation of her.
Yeah, I really don't think it was. I think that was like at the time like a good plot device.
Yeah.
I think it might have been something that was like in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, this Cold War era
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I
We
think
all know
that-
those
I think
communists
that's-
are horrible things all the time.
Exactly. I think that's a little bit of a bridge too far for me.
Yeah.
You know.
To say that it was done on purpose, like we're saying it's kind of added later. It's kind of made into a just makes
And
it,
nobody
it
read
makes it
comic
into a
books back
story.
then anyway, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a much better venue to tell people about that.
Readers.
I think you always want comic books by their very nature are a kind of escapism. So if you can idealize someone's feelings, their aspirations to do better, to be a better person, to stand up for people getting bullied and things like that, I think these guys are an easy way to channel that, right? Channel those thoughts. And, you can get behind them. You're always going to have the idea of, how do you identify with a character like Superman, right? If he can do anything, it's like that's really easy. You could argue Captain America doesn't really have superpowers per se, right? He's super strong and stuff, but I think they did a really good job in the movies of portraying him. At his center, he's still that little kid in Brooklyn getting picked on and getting beaten up, and he doesn't like it, right? And he tries to fight against that. So I think that's really important to hold on to.
Oh, revolutionize. I mean, the comic code affected, I think, a lot of different comic companies very differently.
Yeah.
I mean, they damn near killed EC Comics. If
bet.
it wasn't for Mad Magazine, EC Comics is Tales of the Crypt and all that horror-related stuff. And I think
Books
EC
like that would
Comics
hit the hardest.
Well, I think because of books like that was
The
how
reason-
we got,
yeah,
the reason we got the comics.
Yeah, the
code,
reason
right?
it showed up in the first place.
And the comics code was actually kind of like a self-imposed. It was all the comic companies kind of taking people from, in a weird way, right? It was like they all said, well, like, you got guys from the Archie comics and DC and Atlas and all this, so representatives from all of the comic companies kind of self-imposed a set of
they were
standards.
like, our
right?
entire
Because-
industry is going to die if
Absolutely.
this witch hunt continues and spreads into other things. We all have to join forces, much like
And,
companies join forces to price fix, right, on something. They're like, whoa, don't go underselling that gold. You're crazy, man. Sell it.
Right.
If we all agree we can sell it at this price, everything will be cool. And I think, like you're saying, it's a self-imposed, strict
Exactly.
set
To
of
get
rules.
past basically the McCarthyism, which was like these comic books are, they're turning our children into monsters and stuff, and that all crime is caused by comic books, is what they were saying.
The best
you
was
know?
the kid they tie to the tree and they throw lighted matches at him. That was the best. That was like a 50s thing we watched. It was like a film that they did, a black and white film that they did, where the psychologist sat down and showed what happened when these kids read these comic books. And a bunch of kids all take another kid, they tie him to a tree, and they start putting out matches on him and stuff. It's the
It
craziest,
was about as accurate as
stupidest
Reefer Madness.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It was
exactly.
one guy's
propaganda, right?
Yeah, exactly. But in a weird way, on the other side of that, it might have actually saved comic because now you had to standardize like what mom taking her kid out to buy a comic book now is like, well, it's got the code on it, so it must be good. And it did change the kind of books we get. We had a lot more romance, you had a lot more Western, you had a lot more different genres that weren't like needle in the eye horror. I think that was the kind of the thing where I think comics had kind of got to that point where it was like crime, horror, and moms and dads were like, whoa, this is too much, and it kind of reached that breaking point. So you put a code on it, right, which is made by comic book guys. To what degree it was, if you look at the bylaws and that, there was some stupid stuff, but I think in a weird way
how they have to portray what's happening on the cover
changed
and
the
stuff.
kind of comics we got, right?
For sure.
If nothing else, you got romance comics, you got Western comics, you got true life comics, you know.
Any of the Classics Illustrated and stuff. I
Yeah,
guess those have been
absolutely.
going
I
on
mean,
for
you
a
would say a
while.
little more wholesome stuff, but I think it also kind of begat the whole like Marvel 60s.
Yeah.
You know, the Peter Parkers of the world, the heady superhero, you know, with a heart of gold, right? Worried more about his Aunt May than having the ability to run around and, leap around and be a superhero.
Yeah.
You know, a much more intellectual kind of
Absolutely.
superhero rather than the creeper behind the wall, he's gonna, he's gonna mangle you kind of guy, right? Kind of, but that's also from the 50s to the 60s, you know,
Yeah.
that's a generation change.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
so how did it change it? I think it changed it for plus and minus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Mad Magazine, William Gaines would have been happy.
Yeah,
about
they'd
it.
have gone straight out of
Yeah,
business.
no, yeah, for sure.
Hi.
I'm right, you're not. This is the way. Yeah. Villainy, right? It's
Monologuing, right?
Yeah.
In The Incredibles, monologuing.
Okay.
Like a very egotistical, self-centered view of.
Self-centered
Yeah.
is what I would say. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you know what? Now that you mention it, I guess that is kind of the play. It's like the hero is always supposed to be selfless, sacrificing himself to help
Virtuous.
everybody else, and the villain is always like, everybody else can can eat it. I'm gonna get what I'm
Because
gonna get. I
he
guess.
comes from the
Yeah.
aspect of he knows better, right?
Yeah.
It's like you
Sure.
saps.
Yeah.
You're following this idiot.
Yeah.
Like, I got a plan, dude.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good
I don't
point.
care if you don't believe. I'm gonna take it from you, ready?
I guess I never
Ultron
really,
comes
I never
and
really
like,
thought of it that way. That's
yeah.
funny.
I had neither. I had Chi-Chi.
Alright, perfect.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well,
Usually with really stereotypical
Yeah,
or
we could-
kind of racist kind of. I mean, the
Yeah.
examples I look at
Very
is like
much
looking at
so.
the old Captain Marvels, like the depictions of the Chinese with the buck teeth and yellow faces.
Yeah.
Oh, the
like the
black
coloring
characters.
is totally different. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
It's usually like, you know.
Many of the black characters, even like Spirit and stuff,
Yeah.
like that.
Absolutely.
That just.
That Uncle Tom kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
racist.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just like what an animator will do, right? They call it, what is it, squash and, there's a terminology for it, like to really more, like caricatures, right? Like caricaturing the villainy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the old days, it was very much taking a stereotypical, Chinese people would be yellow and,
Yeah.
slanty-eyed and that kind of stuff.
The Germans in Captain America, they always make them like super harsh looking.
Yeah.
Like everyone's angry.
So
Like their
they're-
eyes, and
yeah.
they look very thuggish. Like they have big mouths. Like Kirby always drew everybody like this anyway, but they've got like big chins, and they're always like hulking. Like,
Making them look
like,
villainous.
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
right? I mean, just kind of
Yeah.
pushing the envelope
Slumped
to.
shoulders, right?
Well,
They're
it's
never
stereotypical.
chest out, standing up. It's usually hunched over, right? You
Well,
what do
that
you
kind of
think-
goes to your last question, right?
Yeah.
It's like the way that they talk, the way
Yeah,
their mannerisms.
yeah.
Like you want to know. I want to know when I watch a TV show. Like, who's the fucking villain, right? Like, wow, everybody's so handsome in the show. Like,
Is this a CW? I can't tell who's who. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like,
They look the same.
Yeah, stereotypical.
Yeah.
Borderline racist kind of
Yeah.
depictions of characters and
Super
stuff like that.
racist for the
Okay.
most
Yeah.
part. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. At least in the past. Not so much today. Today it's a little more like costuming and mannerisms and that kind of stuff usually gets the.
I'm sure there's a lot of color in there too, like
Yeah.
a subliminal
Yep.
color thing. Black, right? Darker
Absolutely.
colors, purple, right? Yeah, if only because
The question is, can they identify with their superpower?
I think if you could identify with just the character itself,
Yeah.
anyone can sit there and have a dream about flying. Anybody can sit there and have a dream about doing something. So, it becomes more like that transference of like you put yourself in their
Right.
shoes. So
Right.
it's not there's no real cutoff there of like I don't think Superman's dumb because I can't fly around and lift up a tank, right? It's like you want to fly around and lift up a tank. So you read that to see what people would do if they had the abilities to do that. So I don't know if that really.
I think
don't know if
that
it hinders too
character-
many
I think-
people. Some people,
Yeah.
there's always people that are like, I don't like men in tights, dude. That stuff's stupid. I need something
Right.
real. So there's always going to be those people who can't do it. But for little kids, especially, like if you're a little.
I think for me,
little
I
kids
think they
don't
can
think about
identify
that.
with the character that is a superpower, right? They can relate to, because it's all about, like Superman, right? By day he's Clark Kent, so you can identify with that guy. Well, can you really identify with a guy that flies? unless you do a lot of zip lining and falling out of airplanes, right? I find that hard to believe. So I think that they can't really identify with a superhero. I think they can identify with the personality that it is a superhero, and I think they kind of fantasize more about the superpowers.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really
For sure.
identify with it,
Yeah, it's hard.
right?
Yeah.
I could be wrong. You know?
You are.
That's what I thought too. My bad. Next question. I said no.
Sean, that was Sean McManus. I know what you're saying, but you're wrong. Sorry.
Or
There's
is it?
hidden messages in comic books? What? I've been selling for 25 years. I have no idea.
That's the secret of House of Secrets. There's hidden messages throughout all comics.
I buy anything that's advertised in a comic book, so I don't know what that means. Does that say anything?
It means you fell for it, you dupe.
But like, for example, are they like aware of the propaganda consciously or maybe like unconsciously?
I think it might come down to how old you are,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if, I mean, you're talking about characters. I think we're generalizing characters that have been around, some characters for 40, 50, 60
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah.
So how they started out in the 30s or the 40s and how they are now in almost 2017, they might be two different characters.
Sure.
And depending on the writer, depending on the artist's depiction and stuff.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if there's really subliminal message. I find today's comics to be pretty much, here it is.
Yeah.
You know, I
They're
don't think there's
rolling it up
anything
and
subliminal.
smacking you in the face
I don't
with
think
it.
there's anything
Their-
subliminal
yeah,
about
with
them.
their agenda, right?
Right.
Their
I
agenda,
don't
what
think
they're
they have
trying
to be, right? I think we live in an age where it's like information is king. So
Yeah.
if you really think that comic books is subversive in 2016, you're maybe a little bit too sheltered.
Yeah.
You know what
Like
I mean?
Captain America
I
starts
think there
out-
maybe was a time that was a thing. I think that was caused by war.
Yes.
I think that was caused by ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, by a lot of people.
Sure.
I think in today's day and age, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that everything that's on the page these days is there to be read, and I don't think there's any kind of hidden agenda. I find a lot of it, today's comic books are a little too political
Yeah.
in what they are, and I kind of wish they were a little more Superman punches Brainiac. All right, Superman saves the day, Superman gets the girl kind of stuff. I find a lot of the comic books that I read these days are a little too much in the headlines. I sell comic books, I read comic books predominantly to get away from that.
Yeah.
You know, I want that fantasy, and I want that kind of...
If you wanted to read, Time Magazine, you read Time Magazine.
Yeah. If I want to read Mark Millar's, the Ultimates talking about, Johnny Depp and this, that, and the other and stuff like that, that's today's comic books.
Yeah.
To some degree. There's still plenty of stuff out there that's got a ton of heart. But I think as
It
far
has
as your
nothing to
question
do with
goes, I don't
politics.
think that has anything to do. I don't think there's
Yeah.
anything that's really like underlying subliminal.
There's probably
You know.
a few that do that, but I think that the marketplace is so incredibly diverse now that you've got a lot of guys that are they're trying to pitch a movie. They're trying to make kids books. There's no hidden agenda in Steven Universe that they're trying to do. They're just making silly, whacked out Adventure Time comic books with stuff. So a couple of them might still be trying to do something. And there are things that resonate with you. And there's things that you'll read, you don't get it at the time, and then maybe something happens a year from
And this
now.
guy's a conspiracy
And-
theorist. too, so I can't believe he's actually agreeing.
We
with
could
me
do
on
this all
one.
night.
Yeah.
And maybe you come back a year later and go, whoa, that's just like that story I read in Captain America that Brubaker wrote about this and that with hidden Manchurian candidates running around shooting people and stuff. And so I think it can all come back around. And I think, but that's something to have something linger in your head for days afterwards and to think about stuff later. That is the mark of a good movie or a good comic book, because you've done more than just sat there and read through it and went, okay, fantastic. And so there's another layer there that you have to kind of peel
There's
back.
plenty of
That's
times
cool.
I've read a book, right? Like I read that AD this weekend.
A book
And
with
it
a lot of
resonated
pictures?
with me. It's got a lot of words in there, I tell you, man. It's not really my kind of book, but it is one of those things where, like a lot of things, right, it needs to resonate,
Yeah.
right? And you go like, huh, well, what was he trying to do with that storyline? Where was he trying to direct me and stuff? So I don't think that's really, subversive in a way. I think that's
Right.
what comic books do, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's pictures and there's words, but there's that invisible gap between the two of them that we're supposed to fill ourselves, right? And that's what makes this
Between
medium-
every
it
panel
isn't a
is
movie,
that
right?
gutter.
It's not giving you
Yeah.
everything.
Whether
You know?
that's a Scott McCloud thing, whether the time that passes in between that panel is a millisecond
Right.
or 50 years,
Yeah, you can.
You can do whatever you want. The second you stop that, a movie just goes. You can have cuts and you can do other things, but the comic book itself, it's like that's a big factor in doing it. A book like The Watchmen is probably unfair to compare Star Wars to, but a book like The Watchmen is a classic example of you can read that book again a second time when you're done, and it's going to be completely different from the first time you read it because now you're going to see stuff in. Now that you know the ending, you'll see stuff in a panel that's like, oh, I never caught that before. While I'm reading it, that tea kettle meant nothing to me the first time I went through this. Now I know what happens at the end. Now I see that medal sitting on that shelf, right? There's a medal that a guy went. Sorry. Now I see that medal, and now I see it in the beginning of the book, and I have an immediate reaction because I know what's going to happen 6 issues from now with that medal, and it's just sitting on a shelf, right? And the first time you went through it, you passed right by it. But now it has a thing. So yeah, it does. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's just good. That's good
That's
plotting.
good storytelling. It's good storytelling. It's not necessarily propaganda or subversive or anything. It's
You want to talk about propaganda? You can take
layered.
another Alan Moore book like V for Vendetta, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a book that's never been more relevant,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you read it in 20 years after the fact. It's,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And
Thank
for
you.
your answers.
Now get out of here. We got work to do.
Thank you.